Hey, how goes it? This may not be an unboxing video, but we do have a lot to unpack. To start us off, Billy leads everyone to Grandma Liko. How did she find the Rising Volt Tacklers? I'm stumped, but that's the least of our worries here. It's great to have her back though. Love what an active role Liko's family plays in this series, as opposed to the last protagonist's family being shrouded in mystery. I mean, this one is too, but they're plot-relevant mysteries. Like, having Diane as this independent contractor come and surprise us with Lucius knowledge just adds to his appeal. Speaking of the man, the opening gives us some new visuals. This time it features a legendary beast, and the most important thing here is, they are not cats! But also, notice the engulfing flame around Entei. One could say it's gouging. Maybe. But that's been the theory, that Lucius Entei is really gouging fire, and I think this small detail emphasizes this distinction between the normal beasts. And will the other ones play a part, or is this just for the aesthetic? So, as a way to catch up, Grandma Liko challenges her grand offspring to a battle. It is a clear callback to the "if you can land a single scratch, you win" moment. Could y'all imagine how condescending that would be now, after Liko's been out fighting literal dragons? She seems eager to show Diane how she's turned up. And is it just me, or does Liko battle better when it's just her? Whether that's intentional writing or not, Liko does a swell job of diversifying her attacks and utilizing Narute's abilities. This episode also shows us a new side of Diane. Liko's fighting spirit doesn't come out of thin air. That flare drive was a battle cry if I ever heard one. I'm also surprised to have all these consistent battles still. I thought that was just the theme of season 2, you know, let me battle. I remember people commenting, well, Horizons is just not battle focused, so they went, hold my potion. Arcanine starts to power up and I could just feel a terastallization coming from Diane, although Liko's the one that hit it. I'm not sure if Diane even can terastallize, but she certainly should have. Liko completely takes charge and gets a fairly easy KO. So with that, it's a victory for Liko, and see, she does have some W's in her. I think this is why people have been wanting the kids to go against more regular trainers and not just big bosses. It helps to power scale with trainers closer to their level, although maybe Diane did hold back a bit. Regardless, once things are settled, Diane shows us what she's been up to, and boy is it a doozy. To begin, she busts out a photo of her with Hamber of all people. What this immediately shows to me is that Liko's connection to the Explorers goes deeper than we thought. If you'll believe it, Lucius actually started the Explorers, along with Gibeon and Ristal, the other 3 founding members. Eventually, Gibeon would come to take over, and it gets me wondering what broke them up. I feel like it's some disagreement that happened in Lakawa, perhaps over how to use the Licorium. I mean, we saw from Spinel's Umbreon what it can do. The crew of course struggled to reconcile this since the Explorers have wreaked so much havoc for them. That said, do we classify the Explorers as an evil team? A lot of that evil seems pretty confined to Spinel. Yeah, Gibeon is pretty vicious to dismiss his grandson, but he's also over 100 years old and seniors know what they want. We hear in detail from Diane, who traveled around following Lucius's adventure book to places he'd been. From that, she was able to discover the 3rd member of the Explorers, Ristal, who was the one who presented that vision of Lucius and Cleavor. Still, Diane doesn't know much about Gibeon, but her dependable granddaughter lets us know about the relationship between Gibeon and Amethio. Albeit a bit late, I guess Freed's starting to rub off on them. While it's mostly new info, we do get a rehash of the stolen Licorium. That does lead to the revelation that Gibeon is the president of Exceed, Freed's old place of work. If you'll recall, the president of Exceed was referred to as a figurehead, which makes sense with Gibeon's absence. That's crazy. Imagine all the research Freed did being to the benefit of their enemy. And it makes you wonder how long Gibeon has been the president of Exceed. Not only that, but it also means Spinel stole from his boss. Yeah, don't put that on the resume. He clearly seems knowledgeable on the pink mist, and is it extending his life? That seems like it would be just dark enough for Horizons. But then, we have to ask why. What if Lucius is still alive and Gibeon is trying to meet up with him? Or is there something he was made aware of in his time that will occur 100 years from then, so he's waiting? See, it's already getting confusing, but just you wait. This gets the group to realize that's gotta be why the Explorers are headed to Lakawa, for more Licorium. Maybe Gibeon's just after immortality, afraid to die, but that seems maybe too dark for Horizons. Still, it's interesting to discuss. The big question becomes then, where is Lucius? Is there even still a Lucius? We know he didn't show when called by everyone at Crystal Pond, which is supposed to summon the dead. Perhaps it could be a Goku, nah, I don't really feel like it moment, as in he actively chose not to return. The team actually does make their way back to the pond to learn more about Ristal. They all have a prayer moment, well, except for Freed, who's too cool for that. But not Cap. This time seems to be different though. In a dazzling way, before them is summoned the specter of a married woman. For someone who just got yanked from her timeline, she's not reacting nearly as strongly as I would. This conjuring also seemed to be against her will though, so maybe Lucius really is dead. I still lean towards alive. Perhaps you have to be dead to be summoned, but this is an interactive ghost. I do wonder cosmically how it was decided from which point in time she'd be pulled from, and how convenient it'd be post-motherhood. For Ristal, even if she didn't know at first that she leaped through time, she did just get teleported to a group of strangers. That's gotta be unsettling, but we don't really see it. Perhaps Horizons doesn't want to harp too much on the "it's a dead person" aspect of this. Instead, it's a mostly civil discussion about what the group hopes to know, including 3 letting her know that she's in the future, which I suppose could avoid the butterfly effect. I don't think this Ristel will go back in time, but will vanish altogether after this. I think it's more like a vision of her from a point in time that's most relevant to the crew. During this discussion, we find out that Terapagos was actually Ristel's partner Pokemon, not Lucius's. She also calls him Pagogo, which is pretty cute. We also see that the pendant originally belonged to Ristel, who's got another item in her possession, and it's a baby. I also believe said baby is played by Ikoi Itani. Love the ways they managed to keep her active. So, this baby's name is Layla, which sounds familiar to Diane. Reason being, that's her mother's name. You know what this means? Liko is a descendant of the Explorers. That's actually wild. Timeline goes like this: Ristel, Layla, Diane, Luca, Liko. The fact that Liko is a descendant of the Explorers and has now joined the RBTs to fight against them is so intricate. All the pieces were there though. The pendant in her possession, Terapagos and the other heroes taking to her the way they do Ristel. Even the resemblance Liko shares to the rest of them. Credit where credit's due, Horizons is planned out. I mean, never thought the Pokemon anime would have me guessing who's the father, but if you were guessing Lucius, you'd be correct. Confirmed what many people suspected. Lucius is the great-great-grandfather of Liko. Wouldn't that be crazy if that's why the Explorers broke up? A romance dispute where Lucius and Ristel ended up together? I can only imagine the missteps and mistakes that occurred between them. Still, none bigger than Freed asking a dead woman her age. With these revelations, our heroes have a lot to unpack. And so do we. I think it is safe to say this is the most complex plot a Pokemon series has had. We spent the entire series wondering the connections between Terapagos, Liko, the Explorers, Lucius, and so on. Finally, it starts to come together. Although in Horizons fashion, even when we get answers, we're still left with questions. I'm so curious what brought these 3 together in the first place. Lucius has always been referred to as an ancient explorer, so was it that mutual interest in journeying that united them? How did Terapagos end up in the pendant that got passed down to Liko? Did it become something of a family heirloom? Of all these generations, why did Terapagos choose Liko to bond with? Could there be something about to happen in Lakawa that both Terapagos and Gibeon want to see? What I want to know is if Gibeon thinks Lucius is still alive, and what would his reaction be if he wasn't? If for about 100 years or more he hoped to see him and then couldn't. That all brings us to eventually having to touch on the topic of death. I find it hard to believe that Gibeon can do all this life extending without any consequence. He'll have to pass eventually like Ristel. And now that Liko knows her heritage, it feels that much more urgent to find Lucius. So as the plot deepens and leads us to topics still never discussed in any Poke, I give this one an easy A.